Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Body Wisdom Podcast, where we discuss the mind body connection and its relationship to health and well being. My name is Tami Bulmash, and today's special guest is Amanda Blair MacDonald, who is joining us all the way from Chicago, Illinois. Amanda has always been curious about people. What makes people tick? Why do we behave the way we do? How did a person get where they are today? She grew up loving music and dance. Along with her musical theater training, she studied yoga, Pilates, floor bar, and various styles of dance, and finally found the Alexander Technique. One of her early teachers helped her understand that the Alexander Technique teaches awareness about the underpinnings of all movement and therefore allows for a deepening in all other practices. Amanda's skills improved and her desire to share what she knew through teaching blossomed, and she entered an Alexander Technique training course. Later, Amanda continued her studies by training in brain-compatible movement practices, earning an MFA in dance with an emphasis in somatic movement, and becoming a registered movement pattern analyst. In addition to teaching at DePaul University in Chicago, Amanda provides professional development for teachers, corporate workshops, online group classes, and private lessons. Later this summer, she'll be launching the first in a series of online courses and a podcast series. You can see Amanda's TEDx talk entitled How We Move is How We Think on her website at www.amandablairmcdonald.com. Hi, Amanda, and welcome to our show.
Hi, Tami. Thanks so much for having me.
I am thrilled to have you. I'm a huge fan of your work. How is the Windy City these days?
Well, winter isn't through with us yet. We're getting a little bit of a cold spell before spring comes in, but it's only April.
It's only over. When does it start to get warmer?
Usually things really get going about the beginning of May.
Okay, it's not too far off. That'll be
Not too
nice.
bad.
Yeah, I haven't been in Chicago in years, but I was born there in Skokie, so it's nice. So I don't know what the weather's like anymore. But Amanda, I'm really excited to talk to you about a number of topics today. And you've just done so much with movement, and it's been such a huge contribution to the Alexander Technique community and the world, really, with all the things that you've learned and done. I wanted to know if you could share with our viewers and our listeners a little bit more about what movement pattern analysis is.
Yes, thank you. Movement pattern analysis is a framework for understanding cognitive diversity. Now, that sounds a little heavy and deep. The idea is that each of us has preferences for how we make decisions and how we interact with other people in the stages of our decision-making process. And these preferences are reflected in our movement patterns. So we can, when we learn what to observe, we can observe movement patterns, we can observe how often they repeat, and we can get a window into how our brain works. It's a really fantastic self-knowledge tool because once you know how it is that you like to make decisions and how you might switch how you interact with other people depending on what part of the decision process you're in, then you have some agency over yourself. You have some choice over yourself about how to capitalize on your strengths and also how to improve your collaboration with other people.
Wow. That is really interesting. I think it's a very inclusive terminology. I really like that.
It's really fantastic because it doesn't expect everybody to be the same. It really says there is no wrong profile. All of our profiles are different and all of our profiles are needed. We need a diversity of ways of approaching decisions, ways of approaching actions, so that we all fill in the gaps for each other and we don't have any blind spots. So it's a really wonderful way of team building and of learning to appreciate people who are different than you are, and how when we work together, we're all stronger.
I love that. I think language is so important, especially as a practitioner. Learning how to approach people in a more welcoming way is starting with the words that we use, and I really love that. I know you're also you do so many things, but what I know you primarily as is an Alexander Technique teacher. So I was hoping that you could tell us a little bit more about your work with the Alexander Technique.
Yes, absolutely. So, Alexander Technique works at the very foundation of how we behave. A lot of people think of Alexander Technique and they think posture and movement. Really, that posture and that movement is, again, a window into understanding how we think. And in Alexander Technique, we're looking at how thought becomes action. So we're dealing with stimulus and response. There's a stimulus that might be outside of ourselves, or it might be our own thinking, or it might be something that we feel inside of us in our muscles. And then we respond to it. And Alexander Technique teaches us to pause so that we have some choice about that response. If we don't pause, if we just respond without thinking, we will always respond in our habitual way. But if we pause, then that opens up a space where we have some choice. So we can choose to respond the habitual way, we can choose to respond a new way, or we can choose to not respond at all. And in that lies all the juice of the Alexander Technique. We learn self-observation, we learn what some people might call self-control, and we learn how to be able to choose how we want to be in the world.
I love that. That's wonderful. So, what is, or is there a difference between the Alexander Technique and movement pattern analysis?
Absolutely, and that's a great question. Thank you for that. They are two different modalities, but they have a lot in common and a lot of crossover, which is why I got interested in both of them. Both of them are very non-judgmental. They don't teach that there's one right way or one wrong way. Both of them are about self-observation and self-knowledge. And both of them are about giving us agency and choice to work to our most efficient, most effective possibility. Movement pattern analysis, what happens is that if you get yourself analyzed by a registered analyst, they will observe your movements and then provide you with a report telling you what they saw and what preferences are. And then you can use that to observe yourself and work with yourself. And you get some suggestions for what you can do to maximize your personal profile. And MPA says that once we're an adult, our profile really doesn't change very much unless we have some sort of traumatic accident or incident that happens. Our profile will stay about the same, and we're not ever going to become somebody that we're completely not. So if I'm somebody who's really high in timing, I'm suddenly going to become somebody who's instead really high in, say, exploring. But what I can do is I can work along the spectrum of timing to work on, am I going to go faster? Am I going to go slower? Am I going to inhibit myself and slow myself down before I jump in? That sort of thing. Alexander Technique is about pausing and observing to choose. And so Alexander Technique can actually help you make the most of your profile, because once you learn what your profile is, then every time you automatically react in your habitual way, you can pause and say, oh, is that what I want to do? Or do I want to use what I've learned about my profile And neither one of those is right or wrong. Sometimes you might want to act in your habitual way. You might have worked a long time to build up a habit that's helpful. So it's just the choice and the non-judgmentalness of it that is important.
It's interesting to have both options to kind of be able to have more resources. I also wanted to ask you really a question about habits because it seems like the world has sort of forced us all to slow down because of the pandemic, but there's still like the to-do lists. Like we still have all these things that we have to do. It's just kind of like adapted. And rather than, going to the grocery store and doing all these things, we have now more things to do online. We're sitting down more. So what do you do to teach your clients and your students to address this sort of culture of doing, constant doing all the time?
We do have a culture of doing. And for many of us, it's been ingrained from a very early age to always be productive, to always be getting things done, to always be accomplishing or striving. And really, that fits into this area of stimulus and response. It's all stimuli. And again, it might be somebody else wanting us to accomplish something, or it might be our own internal urge to get the to-do list done or urge to get the sense of accomplishment. And again, if we are able to pause, then we can choose. And the choosing gives us, it empowers us. We can see this really long list and we can choose powerfully to take it on. Or we can say, I'm only going to do the first 3 today. Or I'm going to pick the most important ones today and let the others go for another day. It's our choice. And of course, we'll always have consequences for our actions that we'll have to deal with. So if something doesn't get done that was really important to someone else, then we would have to handle that. But it really all comes down to stimulus and response. Pausing, choosing. We're online. We're not moving very much. We could choose to do a Zoom meeting standing up. We could choose to turn off our camera and walk around. We could choose to cancel a meeting and do it next week. We just have so many choices that sometimes we're so busy trying to do the right thing or be available or be the good worker that we forget that we have choice and we don't give it to ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, it's part of these habits that we seem to have. And the recognition of habits is a fundamental component to learning the Alexander technique. Could you talk to us a little bit more about habits?
Absolutely. Habit is the thing that's always there. It's running in the background. It's sort of the program that's running in the background. And I like to describe habits like this. We're going to do a little experiential imagination story. When I was a kid, they used to call these fantasy trips where we would imagine ourselves going somewhere. So for you and for our listeners out there, just take a moment and become aware of yourself wherever you are sitting or standing. And just let yourself meet the chair or the floor, or if you're lying on a sofa or something, let yourself meet that surface. And notice what parts of you are meeting that surface. Let that surface come under you and meet you. And then take your attention up to your head. Just let your head be just a little bit lighter than you think it is, so that you can let go of your neck and your shoulders a bit. And then we're going to imagine ourselves taking a walk. It is a crisp, cool day. You can feel the cool air against your skin. You feel the warmth of the sun coming down, cutting through that cold air. we're going to take a walk in the woods. So you've just gotten out of your car and you're walking towards the beginning of the path. You can hear the crunching of some fall leaves underneath your feet. You can smell the rich earth. It just rained, and so the earth is wet and dense. And as you begin walking down the path into the woods, you can see the rays of sunshine filtering down through the leaves. And as you walk along, you come to a split in the trail. And one side is very clear. It's clearly been traveled many, many times. There's not much grass growing where people have walked. There's a clear space. There are no branches across. You could easily go down that path. But today you're going to choose to go down the other path. And the other path hasn't been walked on in a while. So there's grass growing over the pathway, and maybe some stones have fallen in the pathway. And you have to look really closely. You have to slow down a bit and look and make sure you're walking on the path, that you're not going off into the trees somewhere. And as you walk, you notice that there are some bushes and some branches that have started to grow over the path. And so you have to use your hand to gently move them out of the way so that you can step past them. You're going much more slowly than you would have if you had taken the other path. But you know that if you take this walk often, and if you come down this path often, that gradually you'll open up this path, that your feet will cause the grass to not grow, and you'll be able to see the dirt walkway, that you're pushing bushes and branches aside will slowly bend those branches back or break them off so that the next time you pass this way, it'll be really clear and easy. So here you are, you've been walking down this path, and you stop and you decide, I think I want to go over to that clear path. Well, you can't just take a step over and jump over to that other path. You can't just flip a switch and be over there. You have to actually go back. You have to turn around and walk back to the branch in the path, and then switch and go the other way. So all this is a metaphor for habits. If we're walking along our normal habitual path and we come to the branch in the road and we're not really paying attention, we're not really thinking, we might just turn onto that nice clear path without even thinking, because we're able to go at the same speed. We don't have to slow down. We don't have to pay attention to where we're stepping or what might be in front of us. We can just walk along that path nice and easily. But if we want to respond in a way that's not our habit, we have to slow down. We have to pay attention to where we're stepping. We have to pay attention to what's in front of us. That paying attention is that self-observation. And the slowing down, the pausing, is what gives us the space. But eventually, if we walk down that path over and over and over again, it becomes a new habit. So this is also a really nice way of understanding that habit is not good or bad. That often in our culture, when we say habit, we'll think, oh, it's something bad, it's a bad habit. But we can spend a lot of our life building up habits that are really supportive of us. Anyone who wants to build a skill to a very high level, they build in a lot of habits, because we just don't have the capacity to think about every little thing all the time when we're performing at a high level. So we have to build up, we have to do a lot of repetition and build up our expertise so that our habits support us in what we do, so that we can be fully present in whatever we're doing that we want to do at that high level.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. The visualization exercise that you just guided us through, I couldn't help but think of Robert Frost's poem, The Road Less Traveled, and it has made all the difference, right? And that's
Yes.
kind of like a beautiful way of also thinking about the Alexander technique, is that taking this road that is definitely much less traveled by has made such a difference. But I love that example of habits. It was beautiful, just
Thank you so
right,
much.
right on the mark. I wanted to talk to you about the TEDx talk that you did was about, the way you think is the way you move, and the way you move is the way that you think. And I, of course, I agree. But I wanted to kind of talk more a little bit about the Alexander technique in the sense of how it basically leads people to do what they do or what we all do better. So, for example, how would the Alexander technique support people in different areas of expertise, such as teachers, managers, performers, anyone really?
I really love working with people who already have some expertise in whatever it is that they're doing because they know themselves really well. They've worked hard to get where they are. They have a sense of what their skills and their capabilities are. And the Alexander technique really can just give them a little bump to work with themselves even more efficiently, even more effectively. And and it's this pausing to observe. It's that, that's where the juice is. That say there's a performer, say a musician, is stuck in a very difficult passage of music. And they can't seem to get this passage up to their expectation. The Alexander technique teaches skills to pause and observe in really foundational, fundamental ways that they can back up and back off of this piece of music that they're struggling with, observe where they might be getting in their own way, free up from that, and then go back to the music from a new place and accomplish it in a new way without the struggle. And it might be the same thing with a manager or a teacher. This our ability to pause in the face of the stimulus, our ability to inhibit the urge to do too much, to squeeze ourselves or push ourselves or react too quickly. I mean, just think about it. A teacher is bombarded with stimuli all the time. They have to always be keeping track of their students, especially if they're teaching in a group situation, say a classroom teacher. There are students always doing something. There's the clock on the wall telling them how much longer they have in their class. There is their idea of their lesson plan and what they want to accomplish in the lesson. And sometimes that can be very overwhelming, and a person could get really anxious, or they could get into a struggle with a student. And the Alexander technique helps us to slow down, to know that we don't have to rush, that we don't have to have the right answer right now, that we can just take a breath, come back to ourselves. And very often in that pause, the nervous system will downshift and the answer will appear. That deep knowing based on their years of working on their expertise, of their years of experience, that deep knowing will appear and they'll know what to do next. That might not have happened if they hadn't slowed down.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It all starts with the thinking. The thinking, and that is something that we can all relate to thinking. It's not unique to a career path or, a personality. We all think, and that's, I think, the magic of the technique. And a lot of people associate it with just performers, but really, most of the people that reach out with any kind of chronic pain, most of those people aren't performers. So any kind of imbalance in the body is something that can be addressed from the beginning, which is from our thoughts, I think.
Yeah. It is interesting because many people find the technique because of some pain in their body, or they're a performer, or some specific thing that we might call physical.
Mm-hmm.
But then a lot of those people stick with the technique because they learn that it's about the thinking. And all of a sudden they realize they can apply it not just to the initial thing that they came for, but to everything else in their life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that all the teachers, I mean, I can't speak for all of them, but I think many of us would agree that that's what kept us interested in the technique. I think it's such a fabulous way to engage in life is with this new direction, that is a tool that you can use in any activity. So Amanda, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I learned a lot from you. I'm very intrigued by your work, and I can't wait to see what you will be doing next. And I wanted to ask you if you had any final thoughts that you wanted to share with our listeners today.
I think that mostly I want to encourage anyone who's listening to this who has not tried the Alexander technique before to take a look, to give it a try. There is so much wonderful information out there these days. There are videos on YouTube. There are podcasts like Tami's. Tami has some wonderful people on her podcast, so keep listening. There are online groups, and there are in-person teachers all over the place. And so you can just Google it and find just rich resources. Do know that it is a kinesthetic experience. So there is a lot you can do with your thinking, talking about it, listening to a podcast like this, beginning to get an understanding of it. But do know that it is also a kinesthetic experience. And so I encourage you, if you find yourself intrigued, to go and find a kinesthetic experience, whether that be in a group class or in a situation where you can get some hands-on work. I think it's just, it's also, it uncovers itself in layers. So in the beginning, it feels very mysterious, and then it uncovers a little bit at a time. So if you are interested, I also encourage you to stick with it for a while so that you get that really deep experience. It's so worth it.
I'm going to quote you on that. I love that. You discover it in layers. That's a beautiful way of, it's layers. It's peeling those layers, like the layers of an onion, kind of, they just come off one at a time. But when you were talking, there's something else I wanted to add is that, I have a lot of students who reach out to me for lessons, and I'm not teaching in person, and I also don't teach online at the moment. But you are one of the few teachers who does. You do teach online. So what would you say to someone who hasn't, tried the Alexander technique before and they don't want to now because of the pandemic? How would you sort of describe what the online experience is to have a lesson that way?
I think there are a lot of really wonderful things you can learn online. I really took on learning how to be an effective online teacher at the beginning of the pandemic. And honestly, I've been pleasantly surprised at how deep you really can go with the online experience. Another thing to know is that, like I teach both private lessons and group classes, a group class is going to be much more affordable than a private lesson. And even before the pandemic, I felt like the best way to learn is a combination of group classes and one-on-one lessons with a teacher, because you learn so much when you're in the group atmosphere. And so this pandemic is a really wonderful time to explore that, to find one of these online classes and to check it out. It doesn't cost a lot of money to join a group class. And you can get your journey started that way and then decide if you want to do both group and privates, alternating back and forth, or just do one for a while. And then, of course, as teachers begin teaching in person again, then you'll have the opportunity to have that hands-on kinesthetic experience when it's safe for us to do so.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'm going to include the link to your websites in the bio and the description below, and also that website again that they can reach you or get in contact for lessons or more information is www.amandablairmacdonald.com, and MacDonald is MAC. So, Amanda, thank you so much for joining us today. I had so much fun talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me, Tami. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.